Now above the first stage is the second stage right here, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine, which ignites after the first stage separates. The second stage is what will bring the Nusantara Sat-2 satellite to geostationary transfer orbit, or what we like to call GTO. And speaking of the satellite, it is safely enclosed inside of the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is this pointed cone at the very top of the vehicle. This protects the payload from aerothermal loads, heating, and contamination during ascent. But once we've reached the vacuum of space, we no longer need them, so we will jettison the fairing as the second stage continues on its journey to orbit. That's a quick look at the launch vehicle. Now let's check back in with Kate for the latest activity on the launch pad.
Falcon 9 rolled out to the pad with the payload early this morning and went vertical around 6 a.m. local time. The chief engineer held a technical poll at T-1 hour, and launch director held a propellant load and launch go, no-go poll at T-minus 38 minutes. Falcon 9 uses rocket-grade kerosene, which you might hear us call RP1, for its fuel, and liquid oxygen, or LOX, as the oxidizer. With fuel and oxidizer on hand, we need an ignition source to complete the fire triangle. For this, Falcon 9 uses TTEP, which you will see at T-0 via the telltale green spark right before the rocket takes off. Currently, fuel is nearly fully loaded on stage 1, and it is completely full on stage 2. Liquid oxygen looks to be about 85% complete on stage 1 and about 50% complete on stage 2. Once all tanks are full, both stages will continue to be topped off with propellant load until T-minus 2 minutes to keep the temperatures as cold as possible. Low temperatures lead to a denser propellant, and that allows us to fit more propellant into the tanks of the rocket. In addition to the RP1 and LOX on board, Falcon 9 also uses helium, and that's to keep the tanks pressurized in flight and the propellant flowing correctly into the engines without air bubbles as the propellants deplete. Helium load began before the webcast went live, and it will continue to top off until a minute and a half before launch. Engine chill procedures have begun, and that's when we open the pre-valves between the first stage prop tanks and the 9 Merlin engines. This allows a little bit of the cold liquid oxygen to flow into the turbopumps, which brings them down to a temperature close to that of flight temperatures. The super chilled propellant will soon be flowing through those engines at liftoff. So the vehicle remains healthy. We're currently tracking no issues. The payload is on internal power, also tracking no issues. The last weather balloon was launched just a few minutes ago, and it looks like we're within load limits. There have been chances of isolated showers across the Space Coast today, so there was a 20% chance that those cumulus clouds were going to violate our launch weather conditions, but currently everything is looking good for launch. The range is green and is prepared to support today's mission. So with that, all systems continue to be go. Again, today's launch window is 32 minutes long, so if we can't launch right at the top of that period, our backup window will become available tomorrow, Friday, February 22nd.
As Kate mentioned, the payloads being launched tonight are for our customer SSL and include Indonesia's Nusantara Sat-2 satellite. This satellite will bring improved internet, data, and voice communications. Once it enters service, the satellite will have the potential to more than double the number of people who have access to this connectivity. Here's more from our customer on how this satellite will improve the life for the people of Indonesia.
PSN-6 is a very important spacecraft to us. It will provide the first broadband capacity over Indonesia, and I guess the first one in our part of the world to do that. This is the beginning of a long-term relations and beneficial to both of us.
Also included in tonight's mission is Israel's first lunar lander for SpaceIL and Israel Aerospace Industries. This lander will be the world's first privately funded spacecraft to reach the moon. Its mission is to transmit photos and video of its new home and conduct tests of the environment. An interesting fact about this lander is that it will be using its own power to travel to the moon, which will take nearly 2 months. Now let's check in with Kate for our final status update before liftoff.
We're currently at T-minus 3 minutes and 37 seconds from liftoff. Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of countdown. The first and second stages are both nearly fully